one of the ways that schools can comply with Title IX is by meeting the interests and abilities of the student athletes who are on campus. Women are not interested in being walk-ons. They're not interested in...
Why not?
Because they really want to play. They said on the little thing, you know, they want to get out, they want to be the participant who's out there. And if they're not going to be actually participating, that's sort of how they want to spend their resources.
But should men be penalized because they want to be walk-ons? Should men be penalized because they want to walk-ons?
In this case, you'd be penalizing women because they want to have opportunities to actually play the game.
Zena?
Well, I just want to say, I mean, first of all, I think women should have the opportunity to be able to say whether they want to play or if they don't want to play. And Title IX gives us that opportunity to have the opportunity. I want to ask Jessica, so what do you think that we should do?
I think the law should reflect the interests of men and women.
Well, interesting that you bring up the word interest, because we did a poll recently on ESPN.com. Now, I will state at the onset that ESPN.com is an 85% male-use service. But the question, in general, are college women as interested in college men as participating in varsity sports? And you see that no, 75%, 3-to-1. Now, again, that is an ESPN.com survey.
Okay, you know, I want to survey just men with daughters.
And I have too.
I tell you, those men with daughters are going to tell you that those little girls and those women are interested in playing sports.
Well, and Bob, how do we know yet what the interest is when we know that most colleges are not in compliance today with a law that has now been in effect for 30 years? So if most universities are treating it as a recommendation, which they did for about 25 years, which is kind of amazing to think of in and of itself, my question as a journalist is, how can I quantify what the interest is when we are not yet giving the girls and women the opportunity the law says they should have?
Well, one way that, Jessica, in your book that you try to quantify it is looking at intramural sports and also single-sex colleges. What did you find?
Well, I think it's interesting that Christine says most colleges aren't in compliance with the law. She's defining compliance as proportionality. So I think that's an interesting point to make because supposedly there's 3 ways. Look at intramural programs. Look at club sports. You see men coming out for those sports at rates 3 or 4 times that of women. There are differences. Brown University argued strenuously in its lawsuit that about 40% of its athletes were women, and that was the level that they wanted to be at. They surveyed prospective students, they surveyed students in the community, and they kept coming to that number, the number they were accommodating. There are indications. Men's team squad sizes are about 50% larger than women's. And the reason is because men walk on and women don't. And today the system penalizes those guys for walking on those teams without scholarships just because women don't. And why is that? That's stupid.
Zena?
That's senseless.
Well, I mean, we have only 30 years of history, really, that we have actually been having the opportunity to actually play sports. It's going to take time for us to be able to show how marketability we are, that people follow the game. I mean, you look at the sports that are out there now, women's tennis, women's basketball, track and field. I mean, you have people there selling tickets. I mean, and this is because of Title IX.
In the Brown University case, one thing that they said was that the reason why that the study wasn't worth the paper it was printed on was because Brown went out and actually recruited and sought out those players to play on its existing teams. So what the demand was artificially created by Brown University or any university. I mean, that's how most teams, if you think about sort of how they're funded, is you hire a coach, you give them a recruiting budget, and they go out and recruit, and you know, and they fill the team, and that's sort of, you know, how it's done.
Well, Bob, I think if we also think back to our childhoods, I can remember growing up in the suburbs of Toledo, Ohio. Of course, we had no sports, organized sports, till freshman year of high school. But the boys, there were Little League teams, and they would have all sorts of teams, and they would have to condense because there weren't enough boys to fill the teams, yet they started out with more. And I think, Jessica, this may be exactly what we're talking about now. The more opportunity, the carrot that is out there, that maybe in 15, 20, 30 years, we will see those teams being filled, see all these girl and women rowers who want to do these sports. One of the complaints I know that a lot of the critics of Title IX have, the boys did have opportunities for, what, 50, 60, 70 years girls have not had.
Yeah, that's great, but you know what? Congress 30 years ago didn't pass a law that said it was the responsibilities of colleges and universities to create interest in athletics. It didn't. It passed a law that said we won't discriminate on the basis of sex and how we spend our federal education dollars. So what you're talking about is a much broader, more expansive mandate. If that's what we want, and I love to have this debate because normally we don't. Normally we pretend like the situation doesn't exist. If that's what we want, let's have a debate. Let's pass that law.
Well,
we don't have that law today.
One of the big questions certainly that surrounds the Title IX questions of the here and now are men's teams that have been, some critics say, let go to fulfill the proportionality. When we continue, we will meet a coach and his players, a coach and a team with nowhere to compete.
On the Basis of Sex, an ESPN town meeting continues in a moment. Live from Hartford, Connecticut, welcome back to On the Basis of Sex, an ESPN town meeting. Now, once again, Bob Lee.
One of the criticisms of Title IX is that the proportionality rule forces schools to drop men's teams so that women can achieve those opportunities and the schools can then come into numerical compliance. We mentioned that there is a coach here this evening who is out of a job and his team can no longer compete. Roy Johnson, you here?
Yes.
You were what? You founded the gymnastics program at University of Massachusetts, the championship program, and those are team members, I assume, standing with you. Why has your team, in your view, been discontinued?
It's hard to say. I think there's a lot of factions, but you know, I have a question tonight, and you know, as you mentioned, our program was dropped at the University of Massachusetts, and we are launching a program to try to raise the money to bring our program back. But my question is, I'm concerned that with the constant elimination of men's programs at the college level, not just gymnastics, but swimming and wrestling and many others, what is this going to mean for the very future of the Olympic movement? Where will the USA elite athletes come from in 2004 and beyond if these wonderful college programs for men continue to be eliminated?
Before we answer that question, let's put some numbers up here on the screen, because the men's programs now, going back from 1981 to 89, and these are U.S. government figures from the General Accounting Office, and even allowing for the fact that new schools have joined the NAIA and the NCAA and teams have been added. 171 wrestling programs, a net loss of those men's programs, 40% less than existed in 1981, a 68% diminution in the number of gymnastics programs. So that is a question. Well, I want to come back to you on why your program was let go, but who wants to field that question? Nancy?
Yeah, I think it's terrible that men's programs are being cut. And I think it's even worse that Title IX is being blamed for those cuts. At the same time, some women's programs have also been cut. There have been about 100 women's gymnastics programs that have been cut during that same time, as well as women's field hockey, et cetera. So, you know, some programs get cut. But what I think is so awful is that we have another great example is at the University of Southern California. They dropped an amazing gymnastics and swimming program there that had both produced Olympic champions, and their combined budget was about $250,000. The football program that they didn't touch at all was $5.5 million. So it's a spending choice that schools are making. I don't agree with the choices that schools are making at all. I don't think Jessica agrees with the choices that schools are making, and probably anybody here. But, you know, unless you're going to have some legislation that denies schools that choice to be able to make their own decisions within an athletic department, I wouldn't mind a rule with the NCAA tomorrow that says you cannot come into compliance with Title IX by cutting women's sports, or by cutting men's sports. Can't do it.
Bill Curry.
Freudian slip. Sorry, Nancy, I couldn't resist. First of all, in response to the implication that men's walk-ons don't play, they play. They get to compete. My son was one of them. So they don't just walk on and hang out and take up space and money. And the women could walk on and play as well if they wanted to. And maybe there'll be a day when they will, when it gets to be more the thing to do for young women. As for football making money or not making money, that's a very complex matrix, because football very often is the vehicle by which millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars are raised for the libraries and the chemistry departments. Right or wrong, that's the way it works with big spenders and big alumni people. As for decisions about where money must be allocated within the department and dropping significant men's and women's programs, that's absurd, and football should help foot the bill to keep this from happening, and in many cases we could.
Well,